used to y'all being here. I kind of like this. It's like having shelves. Look at that. I may have the Carpenter Brothers build me a little shelf unit with some compartments. Is that eggs? All right, you're good. You're good. All right, everybody, let's get started today. We are glad that you are here this morning. I hope if you've got your Bible with you or your phone app, your tablet, whatever that you like to use, that you'll get it out. We're going to study from the Bible together today. We are going to study James chapter 3, continuing our study that we've been on for the last several weeks. We will finish chapter 3 today. We'll be in verses 13 through 17 primarily, but y'all know we got to take a detour like we do every week. We're going to detour through 1 Kings chapter 3. So if you'll just, like I said, keep a Bible handy, I want us to read some verses together today like we've been doing. We've got several people that have committed to read to us. We want to have those passages read out loud as you follow along in your favorite section. Continue to pray for Anna Krausen. I was told that her surgery that we thought was going to be last week got moved to this week. I believe tomorrow. I'm looking for Brenda. Where'd she go? Oh, tomorrow, right? Tomorrow morning. So remember Anna tomorrow in your prayer time. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people we need to be thinking about. But we are going to study James, all right? So, real quick, we're going to talk about a little bit of a review. Chapter 1, it said you need to consider it a joy when you face a trial. Oh, what? James, you're crazy. Who wants to be joyful when you're going through a trial? But that's what we talked about the first couple of weeks when we're in here, and we're not going to go back, we're not going to redo it, but I do know this from that week and the weeks that followed. A lot of you talked to me, you texted, you emailed, and we talked back and forth, and what I realized is, guess what? Everybody is going through a trial, or they've gone through a trial of some kind. And so what I want to make sure you remember this morning as we get started is you're not alone. If you feel like you are, don't. Okay? Because there's probably somebody in your section today, or maybe even on your row, maybe even sitting right beside you. And they have gone through something, or they are going through something. We need to continue to talk and support each other and talk to each other and pray for each other, and don't be like, well, I don't know what's going on with Jim there. Hope good luck with all that, Jim, because I don't have anything bad happening with me. That's not the attitude that we need to have. James says, consider it a joy when you face trials, because it's gonna test your faith. It's gonna produce perseverance, and that's not the kind of stuff that you really want to hear when you're going through one, but that's what he says in chapter 1. We moved on to chapter 2, and man, he really started hitting the action stuff. James is a book of action, and we're going to talk about that some more today. He rolls into chapter 2, and he just says, hey, well, you know what? You're not supposed to show favoritism. You can't play favorites of any kind. Now, he gives a very specific example in chapter 2. Somebody comes in your church service dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and here comes the poor person in the dirty clothes, and he says, if you give attention, oh, hey, how are you? Oh, listen, we have got a special seat for you right over here. Look, man, look at, did you see what they pulled up in out there? We let them take up 2 visitors' parking spaces for that vehicle. It was so nice. James says, no. But see, I want to make sure you understand, it's not just, it's just for that example. James is only talking about that specific example. I don't think so. I think what James is saying, just don't favor people. We're all sinners. There's no specialness about me or you, or I'm better than Tim, or I'm better than Greg. I might be a little bit better than Greg. James says, don't do it. Don't discriminate, don't show favor. Then he moves on at the end of chapter 2 with another example. He says, suppose you come across somebody dressed in rags and they hadn't eaten. What do? He says, what you don't do is say, hey, listen, I'm busy, I got some stuff going on. Good luck. Be fed, be well, I'm going to run on. No, James says you help the person. You help them. We moved on to chapter 3 last week. Kind of a famous part there, the beginning of chapter 3, where it began to talk about our words. What we say, and we had this little 2-word phrase that we kept saying last week. Words matter. Words matter. Okay? Jason read to us from Matthew 12 from the New Century Version, and in that reading, about halfway through, it says, the mouth speaks the things that are in the heart. That's the words from Jesus in Matthew 12. The mouth speaks the things that are in the heart. What we talked about last week is, you know what? Maybe we need to examine what's in our hearts. What's going on in our hearts? Words matter. We asked you to think about these questions last week, or these thoughts, that you can look at this section in James 3 from 2 perspectives, okay? Maybe you're the person that has allowed what you say to get out of control. That's one camp. Or you could be the person that's been hurt by what somebody said. So I wanted us last week to make sure you looked at it maybe from 2 different perspectives, okay? Not just, this is all about the person that says bad things or uses their tongue or their words, but also think about it in terms of the person that's been hurt by the words. We did that last week. We said careless words spoken by believers can harm the reputation of their church and, by extension, Jesus. So, we said words matter. And then we did this. We had about, 40 or 50 pieces of fruit that were scattered around the classroom last week. We had some apples and lemons. And yes, of course, as it was pointed out, I do not know what an orange is. I passed out a bag of tangerines, or tangelos, and I called them oranges. Guys, I went to Walmart, and this is an orange, right? I did get it correct. Be careful because they roll off. So our point we made with our fruit last week, and we went around, we described it, and what color is it, and what's it taste like, and feel like, and whatever, and all that. But what our point was, you don't go pick an apple from an orange tree. And you're like, that's stupid, Mark. What? James points out in verse 11 and 12, he says, can a spring yield at the same time sweet and bitter water? Can a fig tree bear olives, or a vine figs? So no spring can yield both salt water and fresh water. That's chapter 3, verse 11 and 12. We said, yeah, of course, you don't go to an orange tree to get a lemon. But the thing that we began to point out as we ended class last week is, I don't think I said this last week, but I'm going to say it now. If it's a Christian tree, what's it supposed to look like? Love. Jesus and love and a Christian. The fruit on that tree is going to be Christ-like. And we ended class last week with some challenges because, see, here's the thing, guys. If people are around you and they don't see any Christ-like fruit, are you a Christian? I mean, that's where James is getting, is an apple tree doesn't produce oranges. So what's a Christian tree look like? So we challenged everybody last week, and I don't know if you were able to do any of these, but we challenged everybody to focus on our hearts. Maybe you did some things this week to try to put some positive things in your heart. I hope you did. Hope you'll keep doing it. We challenged each other to stop using our words to hurt others. We said this, if you've hurt somebody with your words, attempt to make it right. And then the final thing was commit to becoming a person who uses their words to encourage, build up, and strengthen. That was our challenges that we ended class with last week. Well, that gets us to verse 13. James 3. Think just for a minute with me. Let your imagination or thought process. Just think about, who are the wise people? What comes to mind? If you want to shout something out loud, it's okay. What comes to mind? What kind of person? If I said, describe a wise person to me, what would you say? They give good advice. That's a good description. What else? If you were to describe a wise person.
Listen twice, speak once.
Oh, I like that. She said, listen twice, speak once. What else? Anything else you want to throw out? I mean, just what comes to mind?
Focused on the solution.
They're focused on the solution, Kent tells us.
They learn from their mistakes.
Yes, they've learned from their mistakes. Those are good things. And I want you to just continue to let that be in your head for the next 20, 25 minutes while we study together. But here's some times, and I'm glad you guys didn't do this, because then I would have felt bad if I gave this example. Nobody said they're smart. Nobody said, I've heard people say, man, they are sharp as a tack. Man, they are brilliant. Because see, then I think we begin to mix up the word wisdom and knowledge. Okay? Wisdom and knowledge are not the same. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts. And for our verses we're going to talk about today, and what James begins to show us, is wisdom is the ability to use those facts responsibly. All right? What do you do with the knowledge? It's one thing to know it. James, as he has been doing now for 3 chapters, he is going to talk about how you use it. What do you do with it? How do you put it into action? Are you getting it? It's the same. His action theme goes all the way through the book. All right? And so, if you're willing, you know, if we're going to talk about wisdom, who do we need to talk about just for a few minutes from the Bible? Yes, we got to. We have to. All right, so go to 1 Kings chapter 3 for a quick detour into Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 3, around verse 5. While you're turning there, I just think about this. Maybe you had a parent or a grandparent that, and I know there are age differences in here. For me, it would be grandparents. Perhaps they didn't go to school as much as some of us now, right? Maybe they quit going to school in junior high, and they started working because that's what they did back then, if I could say that. But I think back about the book knowledge versus the wisdom of my grandparents. Are you getting it? There may not have been any letters after their name. No bachelors or masters or doctors or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm not knocking any of us that have gone to college and other degrees. I'm just trying to get you to begin to, again, realize and think through, what does wisdom look like? What does wisdom look like? In 1 Kings chapter 3, the Lord appears to Solomon, verse 5, during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Now, this isn't Aladdin, Robin Williams voicing the genie in a Disney cartoon. This is God, the creator of the universe. Ask for whatever you want. What would you have done? What would you have asked him? Now, you're like, I would have asked for wisdom because I'm like Solomon. No, you wouldn't have. I probably wouldn't have either. What would you have asked for? Ask for whatever you want me to give you. That's a crazy thought to have, but Solomon knows he's the king. And he's got to lead. He's got to lead this nation of people. Can you imagine the pressure to be the king? This is not a king over 200 or 300 people. This is a king over a nation, a huge nation of people. So what do you really need to be a good leader? Well, look in verse 6, 1 Kings 3. Solomon said, you've shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You've continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But listen how he describes himself. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you've chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people? Listen, in verse 8, it's interesting to me. Solomon recognizes that he's got a hard job ahead of him. Okay? And let's just say, I'm not asking for a show of hands. I don't want you telling yourself. It is hard. I know this is true. It's hard for us to admit that we might not be ready. Correct? Maybe we don't like admitting that we need help, that we need advice, that we need wisdom. I've got it. I don't need it. What? I've got it. I don't need anything. I'm king. He is king, right? Anything he says goes. It doesn't matter whether he gets it right or wrong, or it's wise or unwise, because he's the king. That's how it worked back then. There was nobody to come up and say, hang on, king. I don't think you're acting very wise. He'd just say, okay, kill that person. And a group of guys would come along, grab them, take them out. And that'd be it. I thought there was somebody coming to get me right because I said a group of guys. Are there wiser people out there than you? Now, I've seen some of you in here a whole lot older than me just shake your head, yes. Yes, there are people that are wiser than us. Kaz McCaslin that founded Upward, and I remember a long time ago at a conference, I remember him saying this, it stuck with me. He said, it's a dangerous place to think you have arrived. Do we get to a place where we think, or a position that we think we don't need any advisors or any counsel? Solomon was the king, ruling over God's chosen people, and he knew he needed wisdom from God. He needed wisdom to rule God's people. He recognized wisdom would have a connection to his actions. That's where we're going to get to James. So he asked for wisdom. And I like this too. He says, I need wisdom how to rule whose people? Your people. I need wisdom, God, to rule this great nation of yours. God's pleased in verse 10. And so Solomon's going to reap other benefits, as you know. And for some reason, I don't know why in my notes, I skipped from 1 Kings 3 over to 2 Chronicles, just to throw you a curveball, probably. But you can probably stay in Kings and get the same point. God said to Solomon, it's interesting because we've been talking about our hearts. God said, since this is your heart's desire, and you haven't asked for wealth, you didn't ask for possessions, you didn't ask for honor, you didn't ask for death of your enemies, you didn't ask to live forever. You asked for wisdom. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and paraphrase it. I'm going to give you all of it. Every bit of it. So you're thinking, Mark, what are you talking about? Solomon and James? What does this mean for us? I think God still craves to give us wisdom today. The problem is, I think he craves to give it to us sometimes maybe more than we crave to ask for it. But that's a whole other story for another day. Let's get back to James chapter 3. All right, we got some people that are going to read to us today. And I want you to listen. Please go to James chapter 3, verse 13 through 17. And whatever version you like to read from, whatever Bible that you've got there with you, James chapter 3, verse 13 through 17. And please listen. Lou Jackson is going to read to us from the easy-to-read version. All right? That's what it's called. Everybody listen to Sister Lou.
Are there any among you who are really wise and understanding? Then you should show your wisdom by living right. You should do what is good with humility. A wise person does not boast. If you are selfish and have bitter jealousy in your hearts, you have no reason to boast. Your boasting is a lie that hides the truth. That kind of wisdom does not come from God. That wisdom comes from the world. It is not spiritual. It is from the devil. Where there is jealousy and selfishness, there will be confusion and every kind of evil. But the wisdom that comes from God is like this. First, it is pure. It is also peaceful, gentle, and easy to please. This wisdom is always ready to help people who have trouble and to do good for others. This wisdom is always fair and honest.
Thank you, Lou. Just real quick, Lou, back up there in verse 13, after that first question, are there any among you who are really wise and understanding? What's that next part again? Then you should what?
You should show your wisdom by living right.
We claim to be wise. If we claim to be wise and we're not really living right, are we really wise? What does James say? You should show your wisdom by living right. If I'm wise, of course I'm wise, but I'm not living right. So am I wise? It's kind of back to our fruit example again, isn't it? All right, now, Billy, thank you. Billy's filling in. Had a reader drop off, and Billy's going to read from the English Standard Version. Same passage, James 3. Thank you, Billy. Flip the little switch up in your own.
Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere.
Hey, thank you, Billy. Could you go back and do what Lou did right there after the question in verse 13? Who is wise and understanding among you? What does it say again? By what?
By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom.
In the meekness of wisdom. Y'all hang on to that. Let that just sort of float back here in the back of your head. We're going to talk about meekness a little bit more. Now we got Julianne. Julianne, you ready? You got your mic? Okay, we got a handheld, and we're also going to have you wear one of the Garth Brooks mics, too. We're going to double mic you. No, I'm kidding, right? Julianne is going to read from one, I don't know if you heard of this one. It's called God's Word Translation. You know, we could just be making these up, right? And y'all might not know. No, I'm kidding. God's Words Translation. Julianne.
Do any of you have wisdom and insight? Show this by living the right way with the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you are bitterly jealous and filled with self-centered ambition, don't brag. Don't say you are wise when it isn't true. What kind of wisdom doesn't come from above? It belongs to this world. It is self-centered and demonic. Wherever there is jealousy and rivalry, there is disorder and every kind of evil. However, the wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure. Then it is peaceful, gentle, obedient, filled with mercy and good deeds, impartial and sincere.
Hey, if you'll humor me, Julianne, do the same thing that our previous two readers have done. What's our statement after our question at the end of verse 13?
Show this by living the right way with the humility that comes from wisdom.
The humility that comes from wisdom. We have meekness, humility. Now, this last one is from Ryan House. James 3, 13 through 17. He's going to read from the Message. I know we've used this one a lot, but listen, just listen, and maybe you're looking at your favorite translation while you're listening to this.
Do you want to be counted wise, to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you are wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish conniving. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced.
And Ryan, we're going to do something just a little different with you, okay? Everybody's been reading after. What I'd like for you to do, Ryan, go back there right after where it says it's the way you live, not the way you talk that counts. Read that sentence about what wisdom isn't. Mean-spirited.
Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom.
Is it mean-spirited? Yes. Go ahead and do the other two.
Boasting that you're wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom.
Okay, thank y'all for reading those passages in James 3. Listen, guys, for like the third or fourth time, James is taking us back to our actions, okay? We show our wisdom. How do you show your wisdom? It's being meek, it's gentle, If you're wise, if you are truly wise, then people should be able to see it. Okay? They should see it in your action. You can't, it's not like, well, I've got this knowledge, but I'm just going to keep it to myself. Nobody else can have it but me. Meekness is crucial, and humility is crucial, because here's the thing. If you go back and watch the Right Now Media series on this from 2015, they talk about how, man, we love to tweet, and we love to post, and we love to put our opinions out there. We've got all the answers. But see, wisdom isn't a look at me kind of thing. So let me give you two kinds of wisdom, okay? In the 10 minutes we've got left. We're going to have true wisdom and false wisdom. You ready? It's a true or false thing. But, I mean, not really true or false. It's true wisdom or false wisdom. Here we go. False wisdom. It's earthly. It involves jealousy. It involves selfish ambition. It becomes about me. See, that's false wisdom. Instead, it should be about how can I use wisdom to point people to God. That's the wisdom from above. That's true wisdom, right? False wisdom, earthly. True wisdom from above. That's the kind we need to promote. God is amazing. God changes lives. Now, James gives us some detail here, all right, about what true wisdom looks like. Can I read this list off to you quickly? All right, and I know we read a lot of different translations, and these words could be tweaked depending on what translation you're using. I took these from the old Rubel Shelley book that he wrote back in the 80s about James, all right? Here we go. He said, true wisdom. You ready? Here's the list. I don't know if you people like to write things down, or I know a lot of you are probably putting them to memory, and you're going to talk about them at lunch. I'm just joking. I know you're not going to talk about this at lunch. I mean, you can if you want to, but who wants to talk about what true wisdom is at lunch? True wisdom is pure. That's the first one. It's not just about looking good on the outside. It's an inside and out purity, all right? That's what true wisdom is. The second one is peace-loving. It's a loving heart. Remember our hearts? It's a peaceful disposition. Don't involve yourself in needless controversy. Just don't. Isn't it time for, can I quote Don Killen again? Isn't it time, Karen, for a Don Killen quote? Don't get in a puking contest with a buzzard. Y'all can write that one down if you want to. I've been hearing that since I was old enough to remember hearing it, all right? Just don't. What good's it going to do? I'll show them. And you fire back a response. Just don't. Peace, our true wisdom is considerate. It's pure, it's peace-loving, it's considerate. The word here is kind of how, it's even describing God's own disposition. It's kindness and gentleness, because God didn't give us what we deserved. True wisdom is submissive. I know we don't like that word, but it's a word. Don't be so inflexible that you can't yield to somebody. That's okay. True wisdom's full of mercy. It's compassionate. True wisdom's full of good fruit. True wisdom's impartial. It goes back to what we talked about in chapter 2. You don't show favoritism. True wisdom's sincere. It's honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. So there's the list. Pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, full of good fruit, impartial, and sincere. Now, in the time we got left, we got to get to something that we talked about we talked about it in 2022, and we did a study on it in 2018, all right? But I got to finish with this. You and I have something in common, and this comes from Andy Stanley's book called Ask, A-S-K. Can I say this? We've all done some really dumb stuff. And the three of you that are shaking your head are the only three honest people in the room, okay? We've all done some really dumb stuff we hope nobody ever finds out about, stuff we wish we could forget. And if you're like me, you look back and go, how could I have been so dumb? What was I thinking? Some of your bad decisions, they may embarrass you, but there's been some that have scarred you. Nobody plans to mess their life up, but sometimes we don't put in the necessary safeguards to ensure a happy ending, all right? So, in addition to the occasional dumb decision, we're also good at deceiving ourselves. Maybe you've never said that. Well, I'll only do it once. I mean, I hadn't had any for a week. Listen, I can handle it. Have you ever done that? Anybody else said these things? I'll be careful. This won't hurt anybody as you try to fix one problem by creating 5 more. I can quit whenever I want to. No one will care. Anybody ever say these things? I've said all of them at one point. And does that sound familiar? Here it is. And you're aware, we're aware we're doing it. We know we're doing it when we do it. And it's just like, well, that's okay. Because here's the question. Here's the question that we spent 6 weeks on in 2018 and a couple of weeks on in 2022. We gotta bring it up because we're talking about James and wisdom. Here's the question I'm going to ask you to ask yourself this week. Y'all ready? You already know it. What's the wise thing to do? Ask yourself that question when you've got something coming up, when you've got something that's about to happen. Paul tells us in Ephesians to be careful how you live. Don't live unwise. Live as a wise person. Make the most of every opportunity. James echoes this in chapter 1. If you lack wisdom, ask. Don't be the person that's not willing to ask. It says if you ask, God, who gives to everyone generously, without rebuke or blame, and it will be given to, I'm not sure. Ask. Ask. What's the wise thing to do? Well, I'll tell you what I think and what I'm going to. No, just stop. What's the wise thing to do? God, how about this little prayer, this little one-sentence prayer? God, give me the wisdom to live in this life, to navigate it in a way that honors you. Did you get it? God, give me the wisdom to live in this life, to navigate it in a way that honors you. But no, I'll tell you, do you know what they said to me? And I'll kick them and I'll show them. God, give me the wisdom to live in this life, to navigate it in a way that honors you. Last thing, and we're done. What's our famous story at the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7? What were the 2 types of builders that Jesus talked about? Yeah, wise and unwise, wise and foolish. Got these guys, and they got their house plans, and they got their contractors, and they're ready to go, and they're complaining about the price of building materials. Even back then in the first century, stuff was just outrageous, Russ. It was awful. I'm kidding. I don't know. I'm making that up. But Jesus tells this, and he ends this Sermon on the Mount with these 2 guys. But here's what I want you to end today with, all right? This is where we're going to stop. Don't say it out loud, but just listen. If I ask you to fill this blank in, wisdom is, there's a blank. Don't say anything. Just think. Wisdom is. Jesus answers it in Matthew 7. Everyone who hears the words of mine and... Oh, what in the world? There's that action thing again. I can't believe Jesus and James are on the same page. Can y'all? Everyone who hears the words of mine and does them. Wisdom is this. You ready? Here's the end. Wisdom is putting into practice the words of Jesus. Did you get it? Wisdom is putting into practice the words of Jesus. Now, that may not be easy sometimes, but that's what's wise. And here's what we do, though. Oh, that doesn't really fit my way of thinking, though, Mark. Listen, that doesn't really fit what my team or my committee came up with. That doesn't really fit what my friends think. Let me say this, and we're going to stop. Stay the course and put into practice the words of Jesus. Stop and say, what's the wise thing to do? What would Jesus do? That's what's wise. That's James chapter 3, okay? Oh, man. What are we going to do next? Got 2 chapters left. Let's pray. God, thank you that we could come together and read verses from the Bible together, that we can hear it be read, that we can talk about it and think about it. We pray, God, that we'll have some of the characteristics of wisdom that we talked about, that will be an action kind of person, that are people that will put into practice the words of Jesus. We thank you for how you love us, and you have mercy and grace and all the good things you do for us, Father. Help us to just live that way too.